Okay, Angelica, can I start? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'll just give you technical information before we actually start the meeting. So as you know, this meeting is recorded and it's also broadcast live on the OSCPA social media. Simultaneous interpretation, of course, is provided in all the 6 official languages of the OSCE. We have received a list of speakers and the list is closed. And we ask, of course, to keep your interventions short. As there are many speakers, it will be 1.5 minutes for each speaker. And please, of course, turn on your video when you are given the floor. So without further ado, I'll give the floor to President Bonas. President.
Good morning, Secretary General, and thank you, Roberto, for that advice. And a very warm welcome to everyone to this 20th winter meeting with at least a hub in Vienna, if we are not. As our region continues to experience unprecedented challenges with COVID-19, we have continued to innovate how we work to carry on our important activities. And this has led to today being the first ever parliamentary statutory meeting to be held virtually. In spite of these difficult circumstances, I'm sure that the next few days will offer the unique opportunity to debate crucial issues for the OSCE and its participating states and to exchange with representatives from the OSCE executive structures. As is customary, and as would be the case if we were all together in the Neue Saal in the Hofburg, we are delighted to have with us the President of the Austrian National Council, Wolfgang Sobotka. And we are also welcoming the OSCE chairperson in office, the Foreign Minister of Sweden, Mr. Anna Lindh, who will join us from Stockholm. From Vienna, we'll also hear from Helga Schmidt, the new Secretary General, who took over her position last month. And this is a great opportunity for members to interact with the chairperson in office and the Secretary General. And this is why the agenda is going to enable you to ask questions that you've already submitted, and then it will be a general debate. I would encourage every member here present to focus on questions that relate to what we have heard from our speakers or that we want to hear from our speakers, rather than prepared statements on particular issues. So may we now proceed with the agenda, which I hope you all approve. I take your silence as consent, and I turn therefore to President Sobotka. I beg your pardon, Mr. President Sobotka, to deliver your address to the joint session. President Sobotka, the floor is yours.
Vielen Dank. Ich grüße Sie auch herzlich aus Wien, Präsident Lord Bonas. Ich grüße die Vorsitzende, die in Schweden zugegen ist, und sie wird vertreten von der ständigen Botschafterin bei der OSZE. Ich grüße die Frau Generalsekretärin Schmidt und den Generalsekretär Montella, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Ich freue mich, dass ich Sie auch in dieser Form begrüßen darf. Ein Parlamentariertreffen in der OSZE hat Tradition. Es ist diesmal das 20. und diesmal in einer ganz besonderen Form. Es ist das erste Mal, dass wir uns virtuell in dieser Form sehen. Die Pandemie hat uns, und es ist schon durch die Worte des Präsidenten zum Ausdruck gebracht worden, fest im Griff. Es gibt keine physischen Gespräche und keine Treffen. Es geht nur über die Technik, aber wir sollten sie nutzen. Wir sollten alle Optionen nutzen und das auch als Vorteil sehen. Vor 20 Jahren wäre das in dieser Form auch nicht möglich gewesen. So sollten wir sehen, Und das ist vielleicht der wesentlichste Punkt. Parlamentarische Diplomatie muss auch in diesen Zeiten weitergehen. Und daher darf ich mich auf nur 4 Themen konzentrieren und da kurz anreißen. Das ist das Bekenntnis gerade in dieser Zeit zum Multilateralismus. Das zeigt auch die Unverzichtbarkeit der OSZE in diesen Zeiten. Das ist die Prävention und die Bekämpfung von Terrorismus. Und Kriege und keine humanitären Krisen, die lassen sich vom Virus nicht beeindrucken und sie kennen auch kein Lockdown. Daher sind gerade die Sicherheitskonzepte der OSZE von besonderer Bedeutung zur Konfliktbewältigung und schlussendlich auch zur Konfliktverhütung. Das sehen wir gerade, was die Ostukraine betrifft. Wir sehen es aber auch, was die Situation in Belarus betrifft, die bis zum heutigen Tag höchst unbefriedigend ist und die Leidtragenden sind dort die Zivilbevölkerungsteile. Die Situation hat sich dort kaum verbessert, insbesondere was die Ostukraine anlangt und die täglichen Bilder, die wir aus Belarus bekommen, zeigen ebenfalls ein sehr unerfreuliches Bild. Im Gegensatz in Zentralasien, das zwar hier in unserer Mediensituation im Zentrum Europas, und ich gehe hier insbesondere von Mitteleuropa aus, nicht medial immer wahrgenommen wird, liefert aber die OSZE ganz wesentliche Resultate vor Ort und daher dürfen wir nicht nachlassen, unsere Anstrengungen auch fortzusetzen, denn nur politische Lösungen können gerechte Lösungen sein, können zukunftsfähige Lösungen sein. Militärische Entscheidungen. Es hat sich auch gezeigt, dass militärische Entscheidungen weltweit in Zunehmen sind, genauso wie die Armut letztendlich zunimmt. Die sind mit Sicherheit keine nachhaltigen und keine dauerhaften und vor allem auch keine gerechten Lösungen. Und daher, und das sehe ich auch in unserem eigenen Parlament, sind diese Diskussionen, die sich nicht nur mit dem eigenen Land, sondern mit der internationalen Lage beschäftigen, sehr, sehr wichtig. Und die Parlamentarische Versammlung ist mehr denn je gefordert, auch hier Lösungen anzubieten und Lösungen auch voranzutreiben. Zur Terrorismusbekämpfung in Zeiten der Pandemie und auch der Prävention zeigt es, dass gerade der Austausch und die Kooperation der Parlamente wesentlich ist. Die Bürger erwarten das auch von uns und erwarten, dass wir auch auf einen gemeinsamen Strang ziehen. Und wenn wir diese 3 großen Organisationen, die Interparlamentarische Union, die OSZE und schlussendlich die United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, hier betrachten, 2 dieser 3 Organisationen hat ihren Sitz in Wien, dann zeigt das nicht nur, dass Wien bestens geeignet ist als Amtssitz für Vernetzung und auch ein gemeinsames Vorgehen zu entwickeln, sondern auch den Dialog zu fördern. Ungelöst nach wie vor, dass Kinder weltweit rekrutiert werden, um in terroristischen Netzwerken schlussendlich sich weiter zu betätigen. Gerade der Fall in Wien hat auch gezeigt, wie Leute noch sehr jung mit diesen staatsfeindlichen, mit den aus dem religiösen Fanatismus entstandenen Ideen infiziert werden und dann in einer so quasi auch besonderen Selbstisolation sich auch nicht mehr in der Kommunikation mit anderen austauschend zu solchen Taten schreiten. Daher muss es für uns ein Anlass sein, nicht nur in den Gesellschaften gerade auf die Kinder zuzugehen, sondern auch dort, wo Jugendliche mit dem Gesetz in Konflikt gekommen sind, in Gefängnissen sind und dort von manchen Leuten auch radikalisiert werden. Desinformation, Verweigerungshaltung und die Blasen in den sozialen Netzwerken verstärken solche extremistische Geisteshaltungen in ganz besonderer Art und Weise. Und sie sind, und wir sehen das jetzt, auch eine Bedrohung für Parlamente und Demokratie. Und wir sehen auch europaweit ein starkes Ansteigen des Antisemitismus. Wer an die Verschwörungstheorien und Verschwörungsüberlegungen glaubt, der hat auch immer wieder gleich einen Schuldigen parat, und das sind sehr oft die Juden. Und Antisemitismus ist antidemokratische Haltung per se, wie die Forschung auch gezeigt hat. Und daher geht gerade das österreichische Parlament in dieser Form sehr stark, auch was den Mindset betrifft, dagegen vor. Die letzte Untersuchung, die wir in den nächsten Tagen veröffentlichen werden, zeigt hier ein deutliches Bild. Zurück zur Sicherheit. Sicherheit der Parlamente. Ich glaube, alle von uns haben die schrecklichen Bilder des Kapitols am 6. Jänner noch treffend in Erinnerung. Und jetzt zeigen gerade die gerichtlichen Verhandlungen, was da alles passieren hätte noch können, welche schrecklichen Vernetzungen sich hier aufgetan haben. Und das ist ein Angriff und war ein Angriff auf den Parlamentarismus und die Demokratie, auf die Herzstücke unserer Demokratie. Und daher brauchen wir auch hier Sicherheitskonzepte in der Präsenz, aber wir brauchen auch Sicherheitskonzepte in der Cyberseite. Denn die Angriffe, die wir tagtäglich im Netz auch erleben, und die Kriminalität, die sich hier zeigt, braucht auch ein Parlament eine klare Cybersicherheitsstrategie. Ich darf zum Abschluss richtig herzlich einladen zur Konferenz der Interparlamentarischen Union vom 6. bis zum 8. September in Wien. Wir hoffen, ich habe gerade vor wenigen Tagen diesbezüglich mit dem Generalsekretär in Genf auch verhandeln können, dass wir das in Präsenz doch durchführen oder in einer hybriden Version, sodass ich Sie hoffentlich begrüßen darf, auch in dieser für die Parlamente auch wichtigen internationalen Zusammenkunft. Ich danke Albanien für die erfolgreiche Vorsitzführung 2020 und wünsche den schwedischen Freunden alles Gute für den Vorsitz 2021. Ich kann Ihnen zusichern, das österreichische Parlament steht weiterhin sehr, sehr intensiv zur OECD, zur Parlamentarischen Versammlung, und wird sich intensiv dazu auch einbringen.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. President, for your address. Once again, we support the sentiments which you have expressed. It now turns to the next item on the agenda, number 2, which is my contribution to today's proceedings. So I will commence, if I may. And Mr. President, Madam Chair, Madam Secretary General, ambassadors, fellow parliamentarians, and distinguished guests, it's with great pleasure that I note that so many parliamentarians are connected today. Of course, we would have liked to return to the home of the OSCE in Vienna. And whilst we all miss being in Vienna and the warmth of Austrian welcome, we should perhaps take a moment to remember that we are in a position to carry on with our role and remember the thousands of our citizens who've died, lost loved ones, and who are without jobs as a consequence of COVID-19. We are able to continue our work, albeit in a very different way, since our regular work was upended by COVID-19. We've got quite accustomed to the remote conferences and parliamentary deliberations. At home, I think in all our parliaments, we have had to deal with emergency legislation, to agree urgent economic relief, and provided much needed oversight to ensure that our government's responses don't encroach on the rule of law or our fundamental democratic principles. Over the past year, hundreds of you have joined our webinars, and you contributed to the work of the OSCE. 300 members are participating in this first ever virtual winter meeting. And all this demonstrates the resilience of our national parliaments, the assembly itself, and of parliamentary democracy. I have to tell you, members, that the resilience will be needed for longer, because it's become quite clear in the last few days that an annual session in Bucharest in the usual way is not going to be possible. And conversations are taking place with the Secretariat of the Romanian Parliament and with our own Secretariat to see precisely what form the meetings could take, whether in Bucharest or elsewhere. Of course, we would have been delighted to be in Bucharest in the ordinary way, and thank the Romanian Parliament for its invitation, and look forward to the further discussions on this issue. The pandemic has been a trying time for OSCE. We've witnessed social unrest and armed conflict in several of our participating states. Cries for racial justice have laid bare deep-rooted tensions. Independent media face growing political and financial pressure. The simmering conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh has led to outright war in the autumn. In Ukraine and Georgia, there's been no significant progress towards the implementation of existing agreements. And in Moldova, the pandemic has slowed the headway that had already been achieved in settlement of the Transnistrian problem. All this, of course, has prolonged the uncertainty and suffering of civilians trapped in conflict zones. In the midst of these strains, our organization suffered an unprecedented leadership vacuum that troubled our collective security. Nevertheless, the challenging circumstances of the past year have demonstrated that the OSCE itself is resilient, and we look forward over the next few days to hosting the OSCE's chairperson in office, Minister Lind, and the new heads of the executive structures, starting with Secretary General Schmidt. On behalf of all OSCE parliamentarians, let me wish this new team every success in this complicated mission. I'm sure that our discussions in the winter meeting will showcase our eagerness to work together to advance the goals of building comprehensive security in all our dimensions, and in the interest of delivering real results to the citizens of the participating states. It's my sincere hope that the consensus reached on the nominations at the Ministerial Council mark the start of a renewed international dialogue and cooperation. And that would fittingly mirror the 30th anniversary of the Charter of Paris, which we celebrated last autumn. I'm strongly encouraged, Madam Minister, that Sweden's chairmanship will champion these fundamental values and principles in 2021. As I said to the Permanent Council in answer to a question, the Parliamentary Assembly has made it clear over the years that whilst we embrace dialogue, this does not mean shying away from debates or pretending that disagreements which exist don't exist. After all, debating opposing points of view and holding governments to account is the essence of our work as parliamentarians. I remain convinced that the principle-based dialogue can guarantee true security in the OSCE region. We will speak out when core OSCE principles are defiantly trampled. We will continue to keep every OSCE participating state accountable. We will voice our concerns when established democracies teeter on the edge of populism, and we will support democratic processes through genuine and inclusive dialogue. And we will call out the harassment and intimidation or attack on opposition figures. So we will denounce the fact that while Alexei Navalny is arbitrarily imprisoned and his supporters detained, the perpetrators of his assassination are left to run free. In Belarus, we will continue to push for meaningful dialogue between the authorities and the legitimate representatives of the political opposition and civil society. Following the welcome truce between Armenia and Azerbaijan, we remain ready to deploy our mediation capabilities to advance constructive interparliamentary dialogue between Yerevan and Baku, and to ensure that there's an advanced involvement of the OSCE in the search for a sustainable solution to the conflict. As witnesses to the growing challenge of post-election unrest throughout the region, and despite all the impediments to our work, we will continue to deploy observation missions to elections and deliver clear and impartial assessments. We will continue to help OSCE participating states strengthen their democratic institutions and live up to their commitments taken by their leaders in Helsinki and Paris those years ago. Fortunately, this assembly can rest on a strong tradition of international cooperation. Our ad hoc committees on migration and countering terrorism, which met last week, have brought a particular and distinct parliamentary contribution in trying to answer these major challenges. Our general committees today and tomorrow will tackle the impact of COVID-19 on conflicts, on economic and environmental security, and on democracy and elections. These debates are essential to inject political pluralism and diverse policy viewpoints in the work of the OSCE. But alone, they're not enough. Whilst our meetings are essential to reinforce multilateralism in these times of global crisis, genuine commitment to international dialogue and cooperation must go beyond participation. We need concrete parliamentary action. Back home in our capitals and national parliaments, we must continue to generate debates on key OSCE issues. We need to carry on engaging our governments and encouraging them to bring back much needed high-level political attention to the OSCE. We must keep on calling for the timely adoption of the budget. The institution cannot be fettered by uncertainty over its resources. As the parliamentary institution of the OSCE, we've demonstrated we're ready to assist and cooperate with government structures. If all our 323 members engage directly with their governments on matters relevant to the effectiveness of the OSCE, I believe that would make a significant difference. And the success of the OSCE largely depends on our ability to fight misperceptions, build trust and bridge divides to support the work of the executive structures. So we must continue to exploit the full potential of parliamentary diplomacy to flag crucial issues and break political deadlock. Our Assembly has already had a track record in making proposals and recommending initiatives to make the OSCE more effective. And you will have all seen and read the call for action +30, which we will be taking forward with the help of Ambassador Zanier, who is working with the Parliamentary Assembly. And the leadership of the Assembly will be meeting so that we can agree the program and how that work is going to be taken forward. Your active engagement over the past year and your vigorous participation in this meeting highlights the eagerness of parliamentarians to make the OSCE work. Today and tomorrow and in the months to come, I count on you to mobilize this energy to tackle the challenges affecting our participating states. And I should perhaps at this stage just say to you that parliamentary initiatives will be at the heart of our theme for our annual session, namely reinforcing the multilateralism, which has been referred to this morning by the President and myself, reinforcing multilateralism in times of global crisis and as a parliamentary call for future action. This seems to me to be exactly what the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly should be about. I thank you for your commitment to this organization and your attendance and wish you a very successful and productive meeting. Thank you. I now move to item 3 on the agenda, and it's the address by the OSCE chairperson in office and Foreign Minister of Sweden, Ms. Ann Lind. And I now invite the chairperson in office, Minister Lind, to take the floor.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, thank you for the invitation to participate in this year's OSCE Parliamentary Assembly winter meeting. I always appreciate the opportunity to interact with you. The discussion we had last November, making 30 years since the adoption of the Charter of Paris for a new Europe, was a good example of how we can work together to uphold the common commitments of OSCE. Like all of you, I would of course have wanted to be in Hofbräu in Vienna today to meet in person. Unfortunately, this is not possible due to the pandemic. I hope we will see the situation improve during the year so that we can meet in person maybe at the annual meeting in July or later. The Parliamentary Assembly is an indispensable part of the OSCE family. Your knowledge on how issues relating to comprehensive security affect your constituency adds an important perspective to discussions in the organization. The parliamentary dimension of the OSCE is an important link between the people and the participating states and the work of the OSCE in Vienna and in the field. Through your participation in ODIHR election observation missions, you strengthen the connection between our organization and the more than 1 billion citizens across our 57 countries and contribute to the role of the OSCE when it comes to democracy and the rule of law. As parliamentarians, your personal experience of participating in elections also give vital input to the missions. This is an essential contribution to the comprehensive concept of security. Where possible during my visits as CIO, I want to include meetings with parliamentarians to exchange views on issues on the OSCE agenda. I hope to meet some of you during these trips. We have a security situation in our part of the world that calls for more common solutions and more multilateralism. As chair, Sweden will continue to emphasize the fundamental commitments on which the OSCE was founded and to defend the European security order. Underpinning them is, of course, international law and the Charter of the United Nations. Today, OSCE commitments and principles are being challenged on multiple fronts. It is obvious in the conflicts and crises in and around Nagorno-Karabakh, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, and Belarus. The challenges to what we have all agreed as commitments within the OSCE occur through resistance to open society and violation of human rights and humanitarian law in several participating states, a problem that has grown stronger during the pandemic. It includes challenges stemming from increased geopolitical tensions and new transnational threats such as climate change, cyber attacks, and of course, the current pandemic. And it happens in the multilateral work of the OSCE through occasional blockages and vetoes. Our task as chair is to navigate through these challenges towards common solutions. We will prioritize the comprehensive concept of security across all 3 dimensions, as we believe it contributes to the making of the OSCE truly unique. In the first dimension, we would work closely with the Forum for Security Cooperation chairs and seek to further the agenda of women, peace, and security. The inclusion and meaningful participation of women is vital for the successful prevention and mitigating of conflicts, as well as to consolidate peace when hostility has ended. During the year, and if the pandemic permits, we will invite the military advisors of the OSCE delegations in Vienna for a visit to the Nordic Center for Gender in Military Operations outside Stockholm. We support efforts to ensure that confidence and security building measures remain relevant, also in the current situation when they are being challenged. The Open Sky Treaty plays a key role in contributing to transparency, predictability, and confidence building in parts of the OSCE region. I have expressed that we would regret to see any state withdraw from the OSCE Open Sky Treaty. The confidence and security building measures also need to be adapted to changing circumstances. We therefore support discussions on the proposal for a modernization of the Vienna document with the goal of increasing transparency and strengthening confidence between states on military matters. The structured dialogue is an important platform to contribute to these discussions. The important work in the Security Committee on transnational threats and activities that are linked to the financing and illicit activities and cyber threats will be given due priority. I was pleased that the Special Envoy against Organized Crime should participate in the Security Committee meeting this week. In the meeting, he shared perspectives on the importance of strengthening cooperation in countering transnational organized crime. The second dimension remains a key component to the OSCE comprehensive concept of security. Gender-equal societies are more secure with better prospects for sustainable, resilient, and prosperous development for all. Women are disproportionately exposed to economic vulnerabilities. Women often lack access to social protection, full enjoyment of human rights, and the security that follows from equal participation in economic life. Women's economic empowerment is therefore an important priority to strengthen security. To support the work to strengthen gender equality, I have appointed Liliana Palhovici as special representative on gender. We are also at the expert level supporting discussions on issues relating to environment and security, and also what role the OSCE should play regarding climate and security. Corruption is a menace to all our society. It threatens development, democracy, and security. Sweden will continue the work of the previous chairs and existing commitments to fight corruption and strengthen good governance. Human rights, democracy, and the rule of law lie at the core of the comprehensive concept of security. The right to freedom of expression and freedom of the media are key priorities for us in the human dimension. Democratic processes, civic space, and participation are central to preserve and promote human rights and fundamental freedoms, democracy, and the rule of law, and is therefore emphasized throughout the chairpersonship. We will promote equal rights, gender balance, and inclusiveness, not only within the OSCE, but also in relation to the participating states and their citizens. Civil society is included in dialogues, both in Sweden and during my field visits at CIO. All our work, but most particularly so in the human dimension, will be carried out complementary to and in support of the important work carried out by the autonomous institutions. The visit that I conduct as chair of the OSCE are an important tool to engage in political dialogue on our chairpersonship's priorities. We'll meet civil society and gain first-hand impressions on development on the ground. They are also important to support our priority of contributing conflict resolutions. The crisis and conflicts in the OSCE area highlights the importance of defending the European security order. This is particularly evident in the case of Ukraine. It was important for me to visit Kyiv and the contact line in Eastern Europe during my first trip as CIO. The week after, I visited Moscow for discussion with Foreign Minister Lavrov on the challenges to the European security order and what needs to be done to resolve them. These trips were followed up last week with visits to Georgia and Moldova to discuss the role of the OSCE in resolution of unsolved conflicts there. We are also conducting a series of meetings and conferences to support progress throughout the year. The primary task of the CEO must be to work for more respect for the commitments that all participating states has agreed upon. This applies to every participating states, and I will be consistent in my message. I look forward to working with the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly during the year and hope to be able to meet all of you in person at the summer meeting in Bucharest in July. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, much indeed, Minister Lind. And I know that members of the Assembly will have noted that there are a number of priorities for your chairmanship where perhaps the Parliamentary Assembly can indeed contribute and play a part in cooperation with the OSCE itself. We look forward to working with you, and I'd like to note the good cooperation that we enjoy with your team in Vienna, led by Ambassador Funerad, and we look forward to working with you on all those issues. And I know that members have some questions later on in the agenda, which we will be coming when we get there. So thank you again. Now, members, we move to item 4, the address by the Secretary General of the OSCE, Ms. Helga Schmidt. And let me once again wish Ms. Schmidt every success in this new position, which she's taken up, and reaffirm our support for her work. The members of our Bureau have already had the opportunity of a conversation and exchange with the Secretary General, and I welcome the opportunity which is today gives for you to address our members. Madam Secretary General, Madam Schmidt, you have the floor.
Dear President, Excellencies, distinguished members of the Parliamentary Assembly. First, thanks for inviting me, and thanks, President, for your kind words. And like the chairperson in office, it would have been so much nicer if we could have met personally in Vienna, and I look forward to that opportunity. But also, just let me tell you that I will reach out to your delegations whenever I travel, like I recently did when I was in Stockholm, because I very much believe in the added value of close cooperation for the benefit of our organizations. The Parliamentary Assembly is an essential part of the OSCE family, and your work is absolutely crucial for the OSCE. So let me begin by thanking you for your commitment to the organization, the close cooperation I enjoy with the Secretary General, and for your active engagement in promoting our common values within our constituencies. As parliamentarians, you have your eyes and your ears all around our vast region, and I think this gives you just tremendous knowledge and tremendous expertise on the developments at the country, but also at the regional level, as well as on the security concerns we have in all three dimensions. And I see this as an invaluable asset for the OSCE. The Parliamentary Assembly also provides the OSCE with new impetus and fresh ideas. You have been long been a leader, for example, in bringing emerging security issues into the OSCE debate. And I learned it was the PA that first drew attention to the security threat that trafficking in human beings poses to our region. Today, of course, countering this cruel practice is a very important area of our work, especially now in the light of the pandemic, where unfortunately it has grown. The more, I have to say, the more I learn about the Parliamentary Assembly, the more opportunities I see for synergies. Many of the PA's special representatives and ad hoc committees are working on issues that complement the OSCE's efforts. It was just mentioned before, issues such as promoting tolerance, non-discrimination, fighting terrorism, combating corruption, also strengthening cooperation with the Mediterranean region, and of course, promoting dialogue as a key tool for conflict prevention and resolution. The OSCE has much to gain from your expertise. So I will be looking for ways to cooperate even more closely with the Parliamentary Assembly and to further engage parliamentarians in our work. Dear members of the Parliamentary Assembly, the only constant in life is change. And some challenges hit us by surprise, like the pandemic last year. Others are easier to predict, such as the dramatic impact climate change has already and will have even more so in the coming decades. We need to prepare the OSCE for both kinds of challenges, and we can do so by setting out future-oriented priorities for the organization, but also by reflecting, improving our working methods so we can react quickly to new circumstances. And that's why the PA's recent call for action, which looks for higher level engagement and support for the OSCE, is a very important and a very timely initiative. In the next few years, I think we should reflect together on what the OSCE should look like when we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act in 2025. We should be ambitious, and we should also work towards concrete outcomes that will strengthen security for everyone. And I'm delighted that the Parliamentary Assembly is already very actively debating this, and I wish to offer my utmost support to this ongoing reflection. Allow me to maybe touch upon a few topics we could include in this reflection process. One of the OSCE's great assets is its holistic approach to security. In our daily work, we see how complex, but also how intertwined today's security challenges are. And this means that also the resolutions have to be comprehensive. If you just think about transnational organized crime and corruption, to mention one example, the OSCE is doing good work in Southeast Europe to increase regional cooperation and to build authorities' capacities to tackle these challenges effectively, also by increasing standardization of anti-money laundering and complex fraud investigations. This is a joint effort by many, and I think that strengthening our cross-dimensional approach through efforts like these, we will be more effective at strengthening stability, but also ultimately preventing conflicts. Conflict prevention is the engine for all of the OSCE's work. Along with strengthening the cross-dimensional approaches, I see capacity building as a key tool for conflict prevention. Investing in education, in training, institutional capacity building, this will all increase the resilience of societies, which is also a precondition for conflict prevention. And it's a critical element of the work the OSCE field operations, the institutions and the Secretariat specialized departments do. I'd like to mention the Border Management Staff College in Dushanbe and the OSCE Academy in Bishkek that are very important capacity builders. Resilient societies are better equipped to withstand the root causes of conflict and to help maintain stability and security. Another proven way to strengthen the effectiveness of our conflict prevention efforts is to increase diversity and gender equality. And there is abundant empirical evidence that shows that the meaningful involvement of women in conflict prevention and resolution efforts will substantially contribute to their success. And this is why I'm very grateful to Ann Linde and the Swedish OSCE chair for making women, peace and security one of their priorities. And it's also been well demonstrated that if women are given the opportunity, they can contribute significantly to sustainable economic growth and more resilient societies. So we need to step up our efforts to ensure equal access to economic and financial resources, education, formal employment, including in leadership positions. Women's economic empowerment benefits society as a whole, but it also strengthens stability and security. And again, I'm glad that this is also one of the Swedish chair's priorities. Comprehensive security means that no one should be left out. And that's why the OSCE is providing more opportunities for young women and men to raise their concerns, but also share their ideas on the future of security in our region. After all, it's today's young people who will have to contend with tomorrow's problems. So we need to engage them as essential partners. Our Perspectives 20 to 30 Youth Initiative provides an excellent platform to do exactly that, to bring young people together with diplomats and policymakers to share their recommendations for tackling what they see as the major security challenges of the coming decade. The chair's appointment of a special representative on youth and security, Ms. Rosaline Mabina, a young woman actively advocating for democracy, sends a very strong signal of commitment to advance youth inclusion and youth participation in the life of our societies. And maybe another point I'd like to make, I think we have to think even more about the nexus between technology and security. There is growing awareness about the risks that technology pose, cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, one example, but we should also not overlook technology's potential to contribute to conflict prevention. Ladies and gentlemen, I take my role as the OSCE's Chief Administrative Officer seriously. So my ambition is to increase the organization's efficiency and effectiveness, and indeed the chairperson in office has tasked me to do this. I would want to make the OSCE more inclusive and more collaborative, and I'm committed to transparency and accountability. But also, let me say this before I come to an end: to have an effective and future-proof OSCE, this requires participating states to provide the organization with sufficient funds and with a less time-consuming budget process to fully implement our mandate. Dear colleagues, I know you recognize how vital the OSCE's work is, so I hope we will be strong advocates for the organization in your parliaments, including by lobbying for a more sustainable budget for the OSCE. In turn, you can count on me to be a prudent, to be a transparent, and to be a very responsive manager. And very last point, we have to raise the visibility of this organization. Despite the OSCE's importance for the region, I have noticed that citizens, and at times even the specialized public in many of our states, lack a clear understanding of the organization's added value. And there is no other security organization in our region with the OSCE's potential to bridge differences through dialogue and cooperation, and to build trust and reduce tensions. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to working together with you and the entire Parliamentary Assembly to ensure that the OSCE can indeed be recognized as the world's leading regional security organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Secretary General. And I think we will all wholeheartedly endorse your comments about raising the profile of OSCE and overcoming the somewhat unfortunate ignorance of what OSCE does in our own countries. Now, we now come to item 5, the question and answer session. And as I've indicated previously, this will be moderated by the Secretary General, Mr. Montella. For technical reasons, it really isn't possible to do it as the chairman of the meeting. I'm also sorry that for technical reasons, time that's going to be allowed in the general debate is very short indeed. But I must emphasize that we need to finish at 15:30 as on your agenda, for technical reasons. I hope that everybody will respect the time limit, because we wouldn't want to have to unmute anybody. I can't do it, but I'm sure it can be done somewhere. Okay. Roberto, would you like to take over then to moderate the question and answer session?
Certainly, Mr. President, and Thank you for giving me this very difficult task of unmuting members of parliament. I hope I will not get in trouble. But before we move into the questions and answers, let me thank also the Speaker of the Austrian Parliament, President Sobotka, for being here in person. And thank you also for hosting our Vienna Liaison Office here. We very much appreciate the contribution of Austria. I know you cannot stay for the entire debate, so whenever you feel you need to go, but thank you very much for being present here. So we'll now proceed to our question and answer session and our open debate. We will first give the floor to members who have submitted questions. So we will first go with the questions. We have 10 members who have asked to raise questions to the Secretary General, to the Chairman in office. And then we will have 30 speakers for the open debate. We will cluster the questions. We'll do first 5 and then we move on to the next 5. So we start with Canada on behalf of Eddie Fry. A colleague from Canada wants to ask a question.
Thank you very much. I'm Senator Mary Lou McPhedran, and I'm very honored to speak on behalf of our Chief of Delegation, Dr. Hedy Fry. I'd like to begin by thanking you, Chairperson Linda, for the human security priority for our region and for integrating the women, peace, and security agenda among those priorities for 2021. The Swedish program recognizes that security is not only about relations among states. The program acknowledges that security also depends on the relationship between the state and its citizens, advocating for the protection of basic rights as citizens and the protection of democracy and the rule of law. The rights of citizens, the protection of democracy, and the rule of law are essential aspects of the work of the OSCE, and we in Canada applaud you for raising them as priorities. However, I'm hoping that you can comment on a third aspect of security that has a huge impact on the security of women and girls in our countries. While state actors may, at times, be the perpetrators of violence against women and girls, the biggest security threats faced by women and girls often come from within their family and from other private citizens in their communities. As we're all aware, women and girls make up the majority of victims in domestic violence, sexualized violence, and human trafficking. The COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated this. What will you, as chairperson in office, and the OSCE as an organization be doing in 2021 to address the very real dangers women and girls are facing in their homes and in their communities because of various forms of gender-based violence that are exacerbated by the pandemic and associated public health restrictions? What efforts or initiatives, if any, do you and the OSCE hope to implement in order to stop this violence against women and girls? Thank you.
Thank you. And on behalf of Halsey Hastings, former president from the US delegation, Senator Cardin will ask a question. Senator, you have the floor. Senator Cardin? Maybe we come back to Senator Cardin later on. And now a question from the Netherlands delegation, Farah Karimi. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you also to the speakers. Impact of the global pandemic of COVID-19 on political violence and conflict affected countries has been enormous. We witnessed the increase of political attention and potential for armed conflicts because of the social economic impact of measures taken by governments. The increase of social economic inequalities in access to general health care, and especially COVID-related care, fuel even more the existing conflicts. The authoritarian governments in some of participating countries are using the pandemic to marginalize the oppositional voices and introduce laws limiting the power of parliaments. As the attention of the board is directed to managing of the deadly global pandemic, is in some so-called frozen conflict parties take advantage and start wars. And finally, my question to Madame Schmidt is about the impacts of the pandemic on the operations of the organization. Could you please elaborate a bit more on this issue? How did and does the pandemic impact the operations of OSCE, for example, in Ukraine? How have you been dealing with it? And how can the Parliamentary Assembly support you in overcoming those barriers? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next question from Ukraine, Nikita Poturayev. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Let me ask you a question which would contribute to our joint endeavors in this regard. Why has the OSCE still not joined the United Nations and the UNESCO in remotely monitoring Crimea? The SMM's mandate covers the entire territory of Ukraine, including Crimea. We believe that political guidance of the chairpersonship is important for launching such a monitoring by SMM using well-proven methodology provided by the UN. We look forward to Sweden's and other partners joining the Crimean platform, which is established exactly with a view to translate into reality the political statements on the need to deoccupy Crimea. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And staying in Ukraine, a question from Nestor Sufric. Nestor.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Хочу выразить уважение вам и нашим уважаемым коллегам и выразить свою обеспокоенность в связи с замораживанием реализации Минских соглашений, а значит отсутствием перспективы возврата мира в нашу страну. И с этим у меня два вопроса к нашим уважаемым докладчикам, и госпоже председателю и ОБСЕ, и госпоже генеральному секретарю. Как вы оцениваете фактически отсутствие прямого диалога между Киевом, Луганском и Донецком? Также как вы оцениваете отсутствие реализации законодательных актов в украинском парламенте, которые необходимо принять согласно взятым на себя обязательствам украинской стороной в Минских соглашениях, а также как вы оцениваете тот факт, что 3 телеканала в одну секунду были отключены от трансляции в связи с тем, что из акционеров, депутата украинского парламента, обвинили в террористической деятельности и в сотрудничестве якобы с так называемыми ДНР и ЛНР с навязыванием позиции, что это террористические организации, хотя никто их такими еще не признал. Впервые в истории независимой Украины односекундно отключена трансляция 3 наиболее рейтинговых новостных каналов по обвинению в терроризме. Это очень беспокоит меня, как человека, который стоял у истоков Минских соглашений. И первая встреча в рамках ОБСЕ была организована, в том числе и мной, еще в июне 2014 года, еще в Донецке, до активных военных действий. Спасибо большое. Жду ответа.
Thank you. We will move on to answering those questions. And here I take the liberty of asking whether the chairman in office wants to start first, of Secretary General. We have a question on gender-based violence, operation, impact of COVID, Ukraine on Ukraine. So, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you very much. I'll start with the gender-based violence. And as a chair, I urge, of course, all participant states to live up to the commitments of our common OSCE that we have taken, including commitments regarding gender equality. I want to mention a few areas where our work on gender equality will be especially focused. This year's Economic and Environmental Forum will be dedicated to the issue of women's economic empowerment. We believe that economic empowerment is closely connected to security and to the possibility for women to live their own life and don't have to be dependent on a man, and also having the possibility to have their own livings and also be able to go away from a perpetrator. economic empowerment is often central to enable women to leave a violent relationship. I have also nominated a special representative on gender, Mrs. Liliana Palihovici, who I met last week, and she will help me in the efforts to work for more gender equality in our region and in our organization. Together with a special representative, Palihovici, I want to look into how the OSCE can continue to follow up the OSCE-led survey on violence against women. This is an issue that needs to be tackled on both national and regional level, and I look forward to have a discussion with the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly on how we can continue this follow-up. When it comes to the discussion on Ukraine, first let me say some common remarks. As a chair, Sweden recognizes the vital importance of the SMM, the Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine, and I also visit them at my first visit. We will seek to contribute to the ongoing efforts of the Normandy format and the trilateral contact group to find a sustainable solution to the conflict. This must be done in line with the OSCE principles and commitments, in full respect of the sovereignty, territorial integrity, unity and independence of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders, including the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol. We will continue to reaffirm strongly that the SMM is mandated to have safe and secure access without restriction throughout Ukraine, and recall that the SMM must be provided with the conditions necessary for the implementation of its mandate. The OSCE participating states have made clear commitments of freedom of expression, freedom of the media, and free flow in the representative of the free media's mandate. And that is also what has to be done when it comes to the television stations that was mentioned. And then I guess if the Secretarian want to have something to say on these two, please do so.
Thanks very much. Maybe just to say in general, when it comes to COVID, the OSCE has been among the first organizations to move all its bodies to full either virtual or blended formats. This was important because this allowed us to continue dialogue and to remain operational. It's of course more complicated in the field, and conflict prevention and mediation in a way needs the direct contact. But there was, I think, a specific reference also to SMM. And here just to say SMM has put in place stringent mitigation measures. And SMM, despite the pandemic, really continued to deliver on its core mandate, which is monitoring, which is reporting, both on the security situation, the ceasefire violations, but also on the humanitarian side, the report on the situation of civilians. Now, what has really helped in this context is the use of technology. And this becomes more and more important. So the ground patrols that were complemented by technologies such as UAVs and cameras. And this helped in terms of assessing the situation on the ground. And maybe for the future, we can look also into using them even more. Particularly mine action is a good example here. But as you also asked me, what support we could have. I mean, in order to, we will absolutely need support when it comes to make sure that we stay on top of the new technologies. So because also new technologies are becoming more complex, for example, information management. So here we would also need your support that SMM can implement to the best of its possibilities. The downsides, of course, have been restriction of freedom of movement, but this is an issue not necessarily related to COVID-19. And then just also to complement what our chairperson already said, is we have the structures in place, various structures are engaged. We have SMM, we have the special representative Heidi Grau, and we have the 4 working group coordinators in the trilateral contact group that are working on the different areas from security, humanitarian, political. And so we have all the instruments in place that should allow us to make progress, but we need, of course, the necessary political will. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Canada, Zaid Abul Taif.
Well, thank you, Chair, for the opportunity, and nice to see everyone, although through Zoom. I have 2 questions. They're a bit broad, but I hope to get some answers. The first question is, it's a known fact that the democracy is in such a crisis, and we do face new challenges beyond norms. With the rise of some new powers in the world. How can we counter back to be able to protect the democratic world and our values? That is the first question. The second question is about the digital policies in general. And I believe that we need a collective effort, not just on a state-to-state base, in order to have digital policies that is going to protect the security and the safety of people, and of course, in that to the freedom of our society. So, just I like to know the OSCE, what's the plan and how these 2 topics can be tackled, and if there's a strategies out there. You know, I know it's a very broad questions, but I hope to get some answers. Thank you.
Next question from Turkey, Yusuf Basser.
Söz verirler.
Yep, the colleague from Turkey, Yusuf.
Türkiye'den. First of all, on behalf of Turkish delegation to OSCE PA, we congratulate you on your chairpersonship in 2021. We are witnessing a particularly worrying rise in xenophobia, racism, intolerance, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia in Europe, and there is an concerning increase. It's a fact that the hate crimes, xenophobic, anti-Muslim, and racist incidents remain severely underdocumented and underreported in many platforms. The issue requires a concerted approach, a cooperative approach. What are your plans to mitigate and counter these dangerous rising trends under Swedish chairpersonship? Thank you.
And we remain in Turkey, Kamil Aydin.
Türkiye'de kalmaya devam ediyoruz. Kamil Aydın Bey'e sözü veririz. Sayın Vekilim Kamil Aydın.
Can you hear me?
Beni duyabiliyor
musun? Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead.
Roberto, yes?
Go ahead, Camille. Go ahead.
Are you with me now? Saluting all the participants and wishing them all good health. I also would like to ask a very brief question to Madam Minister Anne Lind, and with reference to her comment on transnational organized crime and terror. Madam Lind, as you may all know, that terrorism threatens everyone by changing its form. I believe making no distinction among terrorist organizations in countering terrorism is so crucial, and reminding fighting against all forms of terrorism is a common responsibility of the international community. What steps are you planning to take against terrorism under Swedish chairmanship? With reference to your, experiences from the OSCE and the country, of course. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, Turkey, Tekin Bingöl.
Honorable Minister, Sweden has taken over the OSCE chairpersonship. We wish you every success. For all the world, in addition to human rights, security, and democracy at global level, the issue of migration and refugees stands as a prior challenge for the whole world, especially in our region. Do you think that Europe fulfills its responsibilities and can overcome the difficulties that we face in these issues? Besides, does the institutional solidarity approach sometimes cause these problems to be neglected and overlooked? Thank you.
Thank you. Last question from Turkey, Mehmet Said Kirazoglu.
Question is to Schmidt, Secretary. I would like to congratulate you on your appointment as election as the OSCE Secretary General. Ms. Secretary General, as we all know, COVID-19 pandemic has brought tremendous challenges and demonstrated the importance of multilateralism to overcome them. And we need cooperation and multilateralism to overcome. We need to improve our collective capacity, and while doing so, we need to join our efforts to uphold our common values and standards. Madam Secretary General, could you elaborate what steps are you envisaging to take to reinvigorate the OSCE in the face of these challenges of COVID pandemics? Thank you.
Colleagues of Turkey for the questions. And now to conclude the question phase, I give the floor on behalf of Halsey Hastings, our former president of the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, who chairs the LCP Commission, to Senator Ben Cardin. Senator, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And Halsey Hastings had hoped to be with us. He's undergoing medical treatment, so I know that we all wish him only the best. So on behalf of our former president, Halsey Hastings, I asked the following question to the chairperson. Last fall, simmering tensions once again erupted in open conflict in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict zone. The International Crisis Group suggests that while the bloody 6-week conflict moved the front lines in Azerbaijan's favor, it has not brought peace. The conflict has been the focus of OSCE conflict resolution efforts for decades. Yet the 9 November ceasefire agreement appeared to be a Russian attempt to reassert itself as the dominant actor in the South Caucasus and to portray itself as a peacemaker. While the government has halted hostilities for the time being, it does not resolve the longer-term issues. How is the chairperson working to engage Armenia and Azerbaijan to encourage a return to the settlement process through the Minsk Group co-chairs? How can the Minsk Group help to resolve outstanding issues and ensure a sustainable resolution of this conflict? And how can parliamentarians participating states best support this critical function?
Thank you very much, Senator Cardin. And now I give the floor to the chairwoman. Madam Chair, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I will try to answer this question, and then the Secretary General can continue after me. I start with a question about how OSCE can protect the values of democracy and freedom, while Russia and China are doing the opposite as the two growing powers. Well, as you know, the participating states have made strong commitments regarding the respect for the democratic principle. And as chair, we have strong focus on democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, and on supporting states in upholding the OSCE unique comprehensive concept of security. We have jointly agreed on this broad security concept. It's also important to underline the 3 autonomous institutions and that we as chair fully support them. Their mandates and their works are crucial for the implementation of the democratic principles. When it comes to the issues of digital policy, this is an important question, and we support the work done by the International Working Group on Cyber. CBMs are one important area to continue to work on. We look also forward to hosting a conference on cybersecurity in May. Then the question of xenophobia and intolerance. And here I would say that the OSCE is active on matters concerning the right of freedom of religion or freedom of belief and the prevention of hate crimes. Two of the autonomous institutions, ODIHR and HCNM, support participating states to promote human rights, tolerance, and non-discrimination. Sweden and me as a chair strongly support this institution. One of the first events of our chairpersonship was an expert meeting to discuss how to build broad coalition in combating anti-Semitism and all forms of intolerance and hate crimes, but also to promote tolerance and non-discrimination in a broader sense. Furthermore, I also have 3 personal representatives whose task is to work against intolerance and discrimination of Jews, Muslims, Christians, and other religious groups. My role as chairperson in the office is to support and facilitate efforts and steps that can increase trust and security through enhanced implementation of our shared commitments, which are matters of immediate and legitimate concern to all participating states. Then there was a question on fighting terrorism, and I would like to thank you for bringing up this important issue. We will work with these issues in different ways during our chairpersonship. As CIO, we will work closely with the UK chair of the Security Committee to ensure that they are addressed throughout the year. We will also organize an OSCE counter-terrorism conference on the 20th and 21st of April. The title will be Reinforcing a Comprehensive Approach in Preventing and Countering Terrorism and Violent Extremism and Radicalization that Lead to Terrorism in a Changing Landscape. It's not a very short slogan, but I think the title of the conference covers what we would like to discuss. This conference will provide a good opportunity to discuss and exchange good practices, as well as to discuss joint challenges. Then the issue of refugee and migrant crisis. Migration and forced displacement is a global phenomenon and requires cooperation. No state can address migration alone, and we all need to cooperate to address the opportunities and challenges that comes with it. As CIO, we will prioritize the important role that the OSCE has to support participating states to implement our joint commitments across all 3 dimensions, so that we can live up to our responsibilities. Here, again, the autonomous institution, and especially ODIHR, play an important role to assist participating states in assessing, formulating, and implementing migration policies and legislation that are gender sensitive, protect the fundamental rights of migrants, and facilitate migrant integration into the society in which they live. And finally, the eloquent question on Nagorno-Karabakh. Last fall, similar tensions once again erupted into open conflict in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict zone. The International Crisis Group suggests that while the bloody 6-week conflict moved from the front lines in Azerbaijan's favor, it has not brought peace. The conflict has been the focus of the OSCE conflict resolution efforts for decades. Yet the 9 November ceasefire agreement appeared to be a Russian attempt to reassert itself as the dominant actor in the South Caucasus and portray itself as a peacemaker. And we are happy that it was possible to get a ceasefire. While the agreement has halted hostilities for the time being, it hasn't resolved the longer term issue. So how is the chairpersonship working to engage Armenia to this? And this was the question, and now I will try to answer it in a maybe not so long way, but anyway. It is the frozen conflict shows that if we don't have a peace treaty that is sustainable, it can break out again. And I think it's terrible that nearly 3,000 people lost their lives during this outbreak of the conflict again. It's a heavy death toll, it's human suffering, it's made abundantly clear the risk inherent when protracted conflicts are not being resolved. While we appreciate, as I just said, that hostilities ended with a ceasefire agreement that was facilitated by Russia and signed between Azerbaijan and Armenia, it is still not a comprehensive peace agreement and leaves many questions unresolved. Here, the OSCE has an important role to play with the Minsk Group co-chairs, personal representative, and the chairperson in office in reaching a sustainable peace settlement and building confidence building between the two sides. The Minsk Group co-chairs and the personal representative or chairperson in office have our full support. I hope that I very soon will be able to go both to Yerevan and to Baku to have discussions on what role OSCE can play to get a sustainable peace agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary General.
Thank you very much. On the two questions that were directed to me and to complement what the chairperson office already said on the digital policies, just to say that there is indeed, I mean, there is the dark side of technology, as we all have seen with terrorism, violent extremism, or the trafficking in human beings, or the malicious space, use of cyberspace, where a lot of is happening already. Our, for example, our in the Secretariat, we have a cybersecurity team in the Transnational Threats Department, and they are carrying out cybercrime, cybersecurity capacity building activities with participating states, which I think is much appreciated. Or when it comes to human trafficking, our special representative is involved in initiatives to make sure or curb the use of the internet, for example, for human trafficking. So that's already ongoing. Then there is the other angle, is how to use the new technologies in a positive sense. This is what I refer to, for example, in replying on the question on SMM. Also in early warning, this is also an experience of the COVID pandemic. In the early warning context, technologies have been put to good use. Again, I think there is what we can reflect further on, and we have started internally in the Secretariat and reflection process, is to see because there's a lot of interest also in the OSCE, because we bring together 57 states, East and West, as it's sometimes called. So, can we provide a maybe multi-stakeholder platform to promote cooperation when it comes to tackling some of the security challenges we all face, every nation face, and no nation actually can tackle on its own, and maybe also seize opportunities posed by the new technologies to be explored further. So this is something we have started working on in addition to the work that's already ongoing. And maybe also just to add, as regards digitalization as an enabler for connectivity and dialogue, there is recent commitments. done at ministerial level during the Italian chairmanship, and our coordinator for economic and environmental activities, he's actually active on that matter as well. And then maybe just also to comment on the how can we protect the commitments. Indeed, I mean, first of all, this is indeed a role the Secretariat has, the executive structures have, and it's ODIHR in the first place. But it's also missions such as SMM. They have a role to make sure that important that their mandate in fulfilling their mandates, they have a role to observe, to monitor, to report on implementation of commitments, particularly also in the humanitarian field. And these mandates have to be taken very, very seriously. And whether we are monitoring implementation or simply sometimes also facilitating the exchange of information, these structures make recommendations to states also to revise policies, adapt new legislations, and that then can make a real difference when it comes to promoting better implementation of commitments. So this is something that I think I would like to highlight. And then maybe just the last thought is it's not only about states and governments. It's the Helsinki process has always been based on the idea that individuals and particularly civil society and civil society organizations have an important role to play also in holding governments accountable for the commitments they have undertaken. And maybe the role of civil society is as crucial as ever today. And if you see again the modern technologies, they allow to communicate across frontiers, and this enables also individuals to make their voices heard. And again, I think this is also provides for serious assessments of how states are doing in living up to their own commitments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister and Secretary General, for your time with us today. Very much appreciate. We hope to have you, Madam Minister, in person as soon as a meeting in person of the Parliamentary Assembly will take place. We don't know if it's the summer meeting or the autumn meeting, but we'll of course work very closely with you. And I would like to also thank you both for the way we work together in a very cooperative fashion. I think this is a great asset of the OSCE to deliver as a whole, as the Secretary General said on our first address at the Permanent Council. Now, unless the President wants to say a few words to the Minister before we move on to the debate.
Roberto, I don't want to take time merely to add to your thanks. We're particularly grateful to both the Minister and the Secretary General for being with us, and look forward to meeting with them again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you again, Madam Minister and Madam Secretary General. So we now move on to the open debate. We have 28 members who have signed up to speak, and we start with Senator Benjamin Cardin from the United States. Senator.
Thank you very much. On January the 6th, I was on the floor of the U.S. Capitol of the Senate when the rioters tried to interrupt the peaceful transition of power in the United States. And some of the first individuals I heard from were members of the Parliamentary Assembly. And I want to thank you all for your good wishes and your concern about what happened in the U.S. Capitol on January the 6th. 2 weeks later, our democratic institutions were strong, and we did proceed with the peaceful transition of power. And of course, Joe Biden took the oath of office as the President of the United States. So I just want to thank you all for your concern. And as the head of the U.S. delegation and as the chair of the U.S. Helsinki Commission, I just really want to underscore and support the comments made by Lord Bonas in his comments. And I want to support the priorities as announced by the Swedish chair in office, particularly to have a human dimension implementation meeting in 2021. And I want to underscore our responsibilities as parliamentarians. In my view, we join those seeking to, in my view, we must challenge those who are seeking to weaken the OSCE and not living up by the commitments. That's our responsibilities as parliamentarians in order to strengthen the OSCE. And we must, as parliamentarians, support the mission of the OSCE and help strengthen it through our actions in our state capitals. So I just really want to say that we're strongly support the mission this year, and I expect a very active participation by the U.S. delegation.
Thank you, Senator. And I give the floor to Peter Tolstoy from the Russian Federation. Peter.
Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги. Рад приветствовать всех вас. Надеюсь, что наша сегодняшняя работа тоже внесет свой вклад в создание объединительной повестки на пространстве ОБСЕ. Не будем забывать, что наша организация направлена на сотрудничество, а не на возникновение новых разделительных линий в мире в плане безопасности. Хочу сказать, что наши граждане ждут от нас решения вопросов, связанных с пандемией, связанных с борьбой с ковидом. И в связи с этим надеюсь, что те успехи, которые на этом пути сделала Российская Федерация в плане изготовления вакцин, будут также услышаны и оценены по достоинству нашими коллегами. Мы с своей стороны готовы к сотрудничеству. Отдельно хочу сказать, что по-прежнему неприемлемым остается тон в отношении российского Крыма и Севастополя, который прозвучал в выступлениях украинских коллег. Но это уже, по всей видимости, дань традиции. Нужно время, чтобы они поняли, что ни Крым, ни Севастополь никогда не вернутся на Украину и всегда будут частью Российской Федерации. Отдельно хочу сказать, что мы удовлетворены той огромной работой, которая была проделана для того, чтобы погасить конфликт в Нагорном Карабахе. Роль Российской Федерации в разрешении этого конфликта останется в истории ОБСЕ. Надеемся на дальнейшую совместную работу. Спасибо.
Thank you also for keeping the time. And Vice President Azaygulia from Azerbaijan.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. I want to make a statement concerning one of the most horrifying and the bloodiest crimes of the 20th century, the Hojal genocide. Tomorrow, the people of Azerbaijan, with great sorrow and grief, will commemorate the 29th anniversary of this tragic event. On 26 February 1992, the armed forces of Armenia committed a massacre in Hojali, in one of the major towns of Nagorno-Karabakh region of Azerbaijan. As a result of this egregious act of genocide, 613 Azerbaijani civilians were brutally killed, including 106 women, 63 children, and 70 elderly people, just because of their ethnic identity. As of today, 16 countries and 22 US states have recognized this heinous atrocity perpetrated by Armenia as an act of genocide, and this number is growing with every year. Azerbaijani Prosecutor General's office has collected all proofs and evidences with the names of perpetrators of this crime in order to bring them to justice, but unfortunately, due to lack of the international support, they are not only enjoying impunity, but also held high governmental positions in Armenia until recent past. In conclusion, I would like to call upon individual countries, OEC, and other relevant international institutions to express their solidarity with the people of Azerbaijan in the name of humanity and our shared values by condemning this act of genocide and by supporting due punishment of those criminals. Mr. Secretary General, one sentence about the role of the OECPA. The OEC Minsk Group co-chairmanship. I think the activities of the co-chairman should be directed towards the realization of the vision of peace, stability, and cooperation envisaged in the trilateral statement signed on 10 November 2020. The co-chairman should lead to mobilize the international communities, assistance and support to post-conflict rehabilitation and reconstruction effort. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General.
Merci. Et maintenant, je donne la parole au vice-président Pascal Alizard.
Oui, vous m'entendez?
Très bien, Pascal. Oui, oui.
Oui, Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Secrétaire général, mes chers collègues, Je voudrais intervenir très rapidement sur deux points, mais deux points qui sont liés. Le premier, c'est la question de la Birmanie. Vous allez me dire, la Birmanie, c'est pas dans notre périmètre et c'est très loin, mais en attendant, ce qui se passe en Birmanie doit quand même nous interroger, tout simplement dans notre relation aussi avec la Chine et avec l'Extrême-Orient, puisque les facilités qui peuvent être données à nos amis chinois pour éviter le détroit de Malacca et accéder ensuite au cœur de notre territoire avec, sans leur prêter forcément des intentions trop fortes, mais en attendant des ambitions quand même extrêmement importantes, notamment en termes de commerce et de diplomatie, nous devons nous intéresser à ce qui se passe dans notre environnement. Et je souhaiterais que nous mettions à notre ordre du jour ces sujets et notamment le suivi de la crise en Birmanie, qui est à la fois une crise de la démocratie et des droits de l'homme, donc qui nous concerne, mais qui est aussi un risque supplémentaire en ce qui concerne notre stabilité. Ça, c'était le premier point. Et le deuxième point, je voudrais quand même, et c'est un peu un appel à chacun et chacune d'entre nous que je lance, dans l'état d'esprit d'Helsinki, que nous reprenions bien les uns et les autres la notion du multilatéralisme. C'est quand même notre vocation, c'est quand même notre raison d'être. Et j'écoutais avec beaucoup d'attention les interventions des collègues précédents. Il y en a parmi eux certains que je connais maintenant depuis plusieurs années et nous entretenons des relations amicales et je souhaite que tout cela puisse continuer. Cela étant, je lance cet appel à ces relations multilatérales, à cet esprit d'Helsinki, parce que je crois que sur certains secteurs du périmètre de l'OSCE, il y a des politiques du fait accompli qui se mettent en place. Alors après, elles sont effectivement défendues avec beaucoup d'habileté et souvent ces situations relèvent de l'histoire et de l'histoire profonde, donc ça on peut le comprendre, mais concrètement, il y a sur le terrain des populations qui en souffrent et ça, c'est vraiment notre vocation que de travailler sur ces sujets-là. Voilà, j'arrêterai là parce que je pourrais être beaucoup plus long. Ce sont des sujets qui me passionnent et je sais qu'ils nous passionnent tous, mais c'est quand même un peu un appel par le multilatéralisme, un appel à la raison et un appel à la paix que je voulais vous lancer par cette intervention. Merci à tous.
Merci Pascal aussi pour ce rappel à l'importance du multilatéralisme. Et maintenant, la parole à Artur Gerasimov, Ukraine.
Dear Mr. President, dear Secretary General, dear colleagues, for more than a year, we all now face the serious challenges stemming from the coronavirus pandemic. Yes, this is now issue number one, but at the same time, we need to remember about other important issues of global security. And one of them is Russian aggression against Ukraine. Because for the last 7 years, all of us can see that one of the member states totally ignores the respect of international law and its commitments in a very barbaric way. Let me update you about the situation. No ceasefire in Donbass. Almost every day, Russian troops are killing Ukrainians on front line. Day before yesterday, civilian was killed by terrorist fire in the village of Vinny in Luhansk Oblast. And also, we have more than 1 million ADPs, let me remind this. Also, we see huge militarization of Crimea, and it's very dangerous not only for the Black Sea region, but also for the Mediterranean. Also, we see the impediment of freedom of navigation in the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea. Russian Federation didn't implement the order of the International Court of Justice of the United Nations of April 19, 2017 on interim measures in the case Ukraine versus Russian Federation concerning its violation of the International Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination and International Convention of Fight Against Terrorism Financing. In particular, to lift the ban on the activities of the Majlis of the Crimean Tatar people, and to ensure access of the population of the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine to education in Ukrainian. Moreover, Russia has led local elections on the temporarily occupied territories of Crimea and is going to organize their parliament election campaign this autumn. This is unacceptable in terms of international law. In this regard, I would like to ask members of the Assembly to continue the policy of non-recognition of the annexation of Crimea and increase pressure on Russian Federation with purpose to push them immediately stop aggression, immediately withdraw their troops from our territory, and return temporarily occupied territories to Ukraine. And about monitoring mission, we fully support increase of UAVs usage by mission and increase of flying time of UAVs. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Next speaker is Vice President Kari Erik.
Thank you, Secretary General. And dear colleagues, you all know and you have your own experience with democracy. You know that it is a fresh produce and it is our responsibility as parliamentarians to make it vivid every day, every year. Every human being has equal rights and value. The pandemic increased every existing difference and discrimination throughout our region. I therefore applaud the clear priority to strengthen the gender issue and perspective in the OSCE. And we have to collaborate so that gender perspective reflects in all dimensions. Regarding the work on the OSCE PA, on the Helsinki Plus 50 project, our intention is to help rise the profile of the OSCE. I hope to continue the dialogue and close cooperation between the OSCE PA and OSCE on this issue. This is our responsibility as parliamentarians. Finally, I feel it is a new energy and engagement in our OSCE family. We have a multilateral body, namely the OSCE PA, where I'm sure every one of us will be active and committed to strengthen our organization, reduce conflicts and make people more secure in our respective countries. I look very much forward to this work. This is our primarily responsibility as parliamentarians in the OSCE PA. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick point of order. We're doing very well with time, but the interpreters will leave us at 3:30. So if any one of you wishes to speak in a language which is other than English, of course, let us know in the chat so that you can come up on the list of speakers. Next is Armenia Ani Samuelson. If not there, then I give the floor to Vice President Margareta Söderfeldt from Sweden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General. Dear colleagues, we are in our second day of the winter meeting. We are speaking about multilateralism, about dialogue, about respect. And this is very important values that all member countries have signed up for in the Helsinki Final Act, in the Paris Charter. It means sovereign quality. It means refrain from threat or use of force, territorial integrity of states, respect of human rights, and self-determination of people. And unfortunately, this is not something that everybody in the OSCE member countries can benefit from. I think here, particular about Ukraine. We have a war going on in the OSCE region. It's gone on for 7 years, started the 20th February 2014. It had to come to an end. The Minsk agreement doesn't work. There will be the trilateral contact group, and it have to be a dialogue, of course, but there need as well to be a result. And this means that Ukraine's border have to be respected, and it needs to be soon. The war shouldn't go on any further. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, Kyriakos Adjan, Cyprus. Maybe we'll come back later to Kyriakos. Doris Barnett from Germany.
Ja. Vielen Dank. Und ich freue mich, dass ich heute wieder dabei sein kann. Also, die Pandemie ist für uns ja auch ein Menschheitsschicksal. Und wir sollten hier die Einsicht haben, dass wir besser und enger zusammenarbeiten sollen und Konflikte lösen müssen. Das heißt für mich weniger feindselige Rhetorik und vor allem auch mal darüber nachdenken, ob man Leute nicht aus dem Gefängnis endlich entlassen kann, gerade in Zeiten wie der Pandemie. Die müssen doch zurück zu ihren Familien. Da denke ich jetzt an Belarus, an Russland, an Armenien, Aserbaidschan. Also bitte tauscht die Gefangenen aus, lasst die Leute nach Hause. Und nach der Pandemie werden wir erkennen müssen, dass wir viel größere Herausforderungen haben, wie den Klimaschutz. Es gibt einen massiven Zusammenhang zwischen Klimaschutz und Pandemie. Wenn wir das nicht begreifen, dann wird es uns in den nächsten Jahrzehnten wirklich schlecht gehen. Denn wenn wir weiter Erderwärmung haben und diese fortschreitet, werden wir mehr Flüchtlinge, mehr Bewegung, also Wanderungsbewegung von Menschen in unseren Regionen haben. Wir werden erleben, dass es zu Konflikten kommt. Deshalb, wir werden erleben, dass es zur Verödung von Flächen kommt und dann wieder neue Konflikte entstehen. Also, jetzt ist die Zeit, die Zeichen der Zeit zu verstehen und auch endlich mal nicht nur zu sagen, wir müssen was tun, sondern tut was in kleinen Schritten. Das wäre ein Anfang. Das ist meine große Bitte auch an alle die, an die wir ständig appellieren. Aber das geht da rein und da raus. Ich erwarte eigentlich auch von meinen Kollegen aus diesen Ländern, dass sie die Sache ernst nehmen und mithelfen. In diesem Sinne, lassen Sie uns jetzt was tun. Vielen Dank.
Thank you. And as some members have indicated they want to speak in their own language, I now give the floor to Joseph Ditti from Switzerland, who will speak in German.
Ja, danke, Herr Präsident, Herr Generalsekretär. Seit dem Beginn der Covid-19-Pandemie Anfang letzten Jahres sahen sich viele OSZE-Teilnehmerstaaten gezwungen, den Ausnahmezustand über ihr Territorium auszurufen, um die Ausbreitung des Virus zu bekämpfen. Zusätzlich beschlossen einige Teilnehmerstaaten, ihre Militär- und Polizeikräfte einzusetzen, um die nationalen Covid-19-Vorschriften durchzusetzen und die zivilen Behörden zu unterstützen. Vor dem Hintergrund dieser Ereignisse möchte ich Sie im Namen der Schweizer Delegation eindringlich an die Bestimmungen des OSZE-Verhaltenskodex zu politisch-militärischen Aspekten der Sicherheit erinnern. Dieses Dokument besagt, dass die demokratische und politische Kontrolle der Streitkräfte zu jeder Zeit bestehen muss. Ich möchte Sie insbesondere an Artikel 36 des Verhaltenskodexes erinnern. Darin steht, dass jeder Beschluss über den Einsatz der Streitkräfte eines Staates im Einklang mit den verfassungsmäßigen Verfahren des Staates gefasst werden muss. Es kam in der Presse verschiedentlich zum Ausdruck, dass es bei den Einsätzen der Polizei und der Streitkräfte und bei der subsidiären Unterstützung ziviler Behörden zu Unregelmäßigkeiten gekommen ist. Die Hauptpunkte betrafen fehlende oder unzureichende Rechtsgrundlagen sowie eine unzureichende Verhältnismäßigkeit. Dies erinnert uns daran, dass die Einhaltung des OSZE-Verhaltenskodex in keinem einzelnen Land einfach selbstverständlich sein darf und dass eine permanente Bewusstseinsbildung in der gesamten OSZE-Region von größter Bedeutung ist. Herzlichen Dank.
Thank you. Now the floor to Leonid Slutsky from the Russian Federation. Mr. Slutsky, if not, Vladimir Zhabarov from the Russian Federation.
Уважаемые коллеги, я приветствую всех присутствующих и хочу сказать несколько слов. Вы знаете, наша организация называется Организация по сотрудничеству и безопасности в Европе. И очень бы не хотелось, чтобы она превратилась в организацию по конфронтации в Европе. Вот я с большим удивлением в очередной раз, много уже лет слушаю господина Герасимова, представителя Украины, который призывает всех объединиться и давить на Россию, на нашего президента, оказывать давление. Я думаю, что многие понимают, что такие методы разговора с Россией неконструктивны. Надо не давить на нас, а надо нам сотрудничать, находить точки соприкосновения и взаимодействия. Поэтому я думаю, что в будущем нам надо, если мы не сможем договариваться, нам будет очень трудно. И хотел очень кратко сказать о том, что меня удивило выступление, не выступление, а документ, который опубликовала немецкая делегация по делу Навального. Я думаю, что дело Навального – это внутреннее дело российского государства. Значит, он осужден российским судом, никаких новых элементов в его деле нет. Значит, там поменялась просто мера пресечения. Все строго в соответствии с законом. Я прошу это учитывать и не делать из этого дела какого-то политического шоу. Спасибо.
Thank you very much. We have actually two more speakers who will need interpretation, and the next one is Leonid Slutsky from the Russian Federation.
Спасибо большое, дорогие коллеги. Должен сказать, что для нас является знаковой сегодняшняя сессия парламентской ассамблеи. Россия по-прежнему привержена ценностям Организации по безопасности и сотрудничеству в Европе и ее парламентской ассамблеи. Мы планируем работать максимально тесно, несмотря на формат видеоконференц-связи, и надеюсь, что к сентябрьской конференции в Вене мы уже сможем работать в очном режиме. Я хотел бы сказать, что данный формат позволяет нам собраться на различных тематических семинарах. Наш формат позволяет нам решить многие вопросы, которые действительно являются животрепещущими для будущего европейского континента. Уверен, что работать без напряжения и действительно по существу тех новых вызовов и угроз, прежде всего пандемии COVID-19, в борьбу с которой Россия уже внесла вклад. Что касается выступлений украинских коллег, должен сказать, уважаемые коллеги, Крым и Севастополь вернулись домой в состав России в твердом соответствии с Уставом Организации Объединенных Наций. Я поздравляю каждого крымчанина и каждого севастопольца. И посмотрите, сегодня выступаете на эту тему только вы. Я предложил бы нам закончить дебаты. И Крым, и Севастополь навсегда на политической карте мира в составе Российской Федерации. Спасибо.
Ravashan Alimov, Uzbekistan now.
Спасибо. Уважаемый председатель, уважаемая госпожа генеральный секретарь, уважаемые коллеги, нынешняя зимняя сессия парламентской ассамблеи ОБСЕ имеет особое значение и крайне актуально в сложившихся условиях. Глобальная пандемия показала нашу глубокую взаимосвязь и общую уязвимость перед подобными вызовами. Во многих странах уже начались кампании по вакцинации населения. Выражаем надежду, что совместными усилиями мы постепенно преодолеем и эту угрозу. Все это актуализирует вопрос поиска наиболее эффективных форм, методов и механизмов устранения последствий ковид как для экономики, так и для социальных институтов, которые серьезно пострадали. Кроме того, важно этот вопрос выработки системных, упреждающих мер, которые позволили бы избежать развития событий аналогичных тем, которые были в прошлом 2020 году. Уважаемые дамы и господа, хотел бы в этом контексте представить вашему вниманию инициативу президента Республики Узбекистан господина Мирзияева, выдвинутую на 75-й сессии Генеральной Ассамблеи ООН в сентябре прошлого года. Данные инициативы актуальны для пандемийного или постпандемийного периода. Они содержат также конкретные меры превентивного характера. Во-первых, глобальная угроза, к сожалению, не привела к консолидации усилий мирового сообщества и выявила целый ряд общемировых проблем, системы реагирования по подобным вызовам. Президент Узбекистана предложил инициативу о принятии Международного кодекса ООН о добровольных обязательствах государств в период пандемии. Основная цель этого кодекса – закрепить минимальные добровольные обязательства государств в политической, социально-экономической, гуманитарной, правозащитной сферах, как перед своими гражданами, так и перед международными партнерами. Во-вторых, глобальная пандемия, вызванная экономической трудностью, сильнее всего ударили по самым бедным, социально уязвимым слоям населения. В этой связи Узбекистан призвал определить тему борьбы с бедностью как одно из основных на предстоящей сессии Генеральной Ассамблеи ООН. В-третьих, пандемия оказала неэффективность деятельности органов власти и отсутствие транспарентности и интерактивной связи с гражданским обществом, и в этом актуализирует вопрос защиты прав человека. А негативные социально-экономические последствия пандемии на глобальном уровне могут привести к сложностям в реализации целей устойчивого развития. В качестве ответов на данные вызовы Узбекистан предлагает повысить уровень парламентов в достижении целей устойчивого развития ООН и обеспечения прав человека, в том числе путем принятия специальной резолюции ООН. Уважаемые коллеги, инициатива Узбекистана отражает актуальные вызовы современности, а их реализация, мы верим, станет важным практическим вкладом в общемировые усилия по устранению последствий пандемии. Благодарю вас за внимание.
Grazie mille. Ho chiesto di prendere la parola all'onorevole per Joan Pons della delegazione spagnola e facoltà. The Spanish colleague is not connected. Then I give the floor to Grigory Karasin from the Russian Federation.
Роберто.
Sí.
Уважаемый господин председатель, я хотел бы привлечь еще раз внимание к важности спокойной и конструктивной атмосферы межгосударственного и межпарламентского общения, которое, я убежден, должен быть направлен на достижение конкретных результатов, но никак не на обострение противоречий и взаимного недоверия. Это особенно актуально в драматических условиях нашей борьбы с пандемией. Чрезвычайно важно не терять из поля зрения то главное, к чему мы стремимся, взаимное понимание и позитивная повестка. Именно для этого и была создана организация. Последние годы стали свидетелями того, что целый ряд государств и региональных союзов начали активно задействовать язык санкций и политико-пропагандистских нападок. Абсолютно недальновидный и опасный курс. Подчеркну, что такой тональностью с Россией говорить абсолютно бесполезно и даже опасно. Не в нашей исторической традиции мириться с такими подходами. Насколько я знаю, с ведущими политиками в мире эта наша черта хорошо известна. Кроме того, абсолютно недопустимо устраивать санкционные атаки против государств за решение проблем сугубо внутриполитического характера. Это абсурд, и абсурд весьма опасный. Я рассчитываю, что это будет усвоено. Спасибо.
Thank you. Per Pons from the Spanish delegation. You have the floor.
Sí, muchas gracias, Roberto. ¿Se oye bien? Bueno, pues muchas gracias por hacer posible esta sesión de invierno de forma telemática. Hace un año el virus era prácticamente desconocido y hoy hemos aprendido a vivir con la pandemia, a combatirla y sobre todo a luchar todos juntos, ¿no? Yo quería hacer dos grandes apuntes, ¿no? Primero, como país miembro de la Unión Europea hemos hecho una respuesta sin precedentes a nivel europeo con el Next Generation Fund y, por tanto, tenemos un primer desafío, que es la pandemia, y un segundo desafío, que es la recuperación económica. Yo creo que como parlamentarios tenemos estos dos elementos clave. Pero también hay otros que se han mencionado anteriormente y yo, como miembro de la delegación española, no los quiero dejar pasar. Protección del planeta, transición ecológica justa, fomento de la educación, protección de la igualdad y lucha contra la violencia contra las mujeres, un mejor multilateralismo, como decía Pascal Alizard, mayor seguridad global y, sobre todo, también el descrédito de la democracia que están poniendo encima de la mesa muchos gobiernos populistas. Por tanto, para resumir, tenemos problemas de fondo, que son todos estos que acabo de mencionar, y también dos temas urgentes, pandemia y recuperación económica. Muchísimas gracias y, sobre todo, gracias por organizar esto de forma telemática. Gracias.
Thank you. The last speaker requiring interpretation is Nestor Sufrich from Ukraine. You have the floor.
Спасибо, господин председатель, коллеги. Я хочу начать свое выступление со слов благодарности Терезе Рибейро, нашему представителю ОБСЕ по вопросам свободы СМИ, которая 3 февраля мгновенно отреагировала на неконституционный незаконный указ о введении санкций в отношении одного из моих коллег из оппозиционной фракции в украинском парламенте, который является владельцем 3 телеканалов, наиболее рейтинговых новостных телеканалов, вещание которых было отключено в 1 секунду. Персональные санкции по обвинению не в чем-то, а именно в террористической деятельности были выдвинуты в отношении него и его гражданской супруги. Через несколько дней по обвинению в терроризме были введены персональные санкции в отношении лидера нашей партии Виктора Медведчука и его супруги Оксаны Марченко. Чем это объясняется? Падение рейтинга президента Зеленского и его правящей партии более чем в 3 раза за последний год, до, соответственно, 20-15%, было объяснено активностью именно оппозиции и телеканалов, которые сегодня показывают реальную ситуацию в стране. Не нашли никаких других быстрых решений, не удосужились представить доказательства в суд и никаких следственных действий не проведя, просто объявили лидеров террористами и этим самым приостановили деятельность 3 телеканалов. Мы требуем доказательств, мы требуем сегодня предоставить возможность журналистам работать. Сегодня никто не будет прикрываться оппозиционной деятельностью и скрываться от ответственности. Мы готовы отвечать, но в рамках закона и в суде на основании реальных доказательств. А сегодня делать из так называемых ДНР, ЛНР, которые, безусловно, являются незаконными, неконституционными организациями, делать террористическими только из-за того, чтобы лидеров украинской оппозиции, которые сегодня начинают доминировать в украинском электоральном поле, было бы неразумно. Хочу напомнить, Минские соглашения подписаны именно с их представителями. А значит, о том, что подписывались договора с террористами, речи быть не может. Поэтому прошу обратить на это внимание. Это очень опасный синдром образца 1933 года Советского Союза. Но я слышал дискуссию, чей Крым, хочу сказать, с любовью и с ответственностью. Крым, он украинский. Спасибо за внимание.
Thank you, and thanks to the services of the interpreter. We very much appreciate your help. Now we move on. We have still 11 speakers. We have to do it very shortly because we have a meeting in half an hour and the room needs to be sanitized. So we'll try to take as many as possible. And if any of you wishes to speak maybe under the committee, that would be actually appreciated. So, and I'll give the floor to Karla Marikova from the Czech Republic.
Dear Mr. President, dear Excellency, dear colleagues, the Czech Republic remains committed to preserving and strengthening the OSCE acquis in all 3 dimensions and legacy we have been building for decades, and which remains extremely relevant for all of us as we face and address current challenges and risks. Let me mention among other elements of the OSCE political military toolbox, the Vienna document, the Vienna document. As you know, the Czech Republic and a large group of OSCE participating states have been investing every effort in the process of the needed modernization of this current stone of the OSCE, arms control and confidence and security building architecture. We have currently and very good and comprehensive modernization proposal on the table introduced during the Czech chairmanship of the Forum for Security Cooperation, which has gotten a very large amount of support. We do believe that bringing this properly into life, be a tremendous step forward and a much needed contribution to countering the gradual deterioration of the OSCE political-military landscape. We call on all participating states to join us in supporting this comprehensive, balanced, and constructive proposal to modernize the Vienna document.
Next speaker is Vesna Barkovic from Serbia. Izvolite.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, we are all aware that we are facing with a very serious pandemic, and more than ever we need solidarity and unity. I will briefly share the experience from my country in the fight against the COVID-19. So far, we have managed to vaccinate more than 1.5 million citizens out of a total 7.5 million. In terms of the number of vaccinated, we are first in Europe and sixth in the world. 4 different vaccines are available to our citizens. We expect to produce the vaccine before the end of this year. It will be important for not only for us, but also for our entire region. We are safe if we live in a safe environment. Serbia has donated vaccines for vaccination of medical workers to some of its neighbors, North Macedonia, Montenegro, and Republika Srpska. And I have at the end of my speech, because I don't have enough time, only one proposal to this parliamentary assembly, that is to open debate about cyber security in the light of the COVID-19 crisis, as well as protection of human rights on the internet. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Ioannis Gutski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We all know that OSCE has been partly paralyzed by these well-known frozen and also flailing conflicts. Just a few years ago, 5 years ago, we had this very important panel of eminent persons, which they led by Ambassador Ischinger. So it was very important to show the way forward for better functioning OSCE, even though this Ukraine problem has been as an obstacle to go further. I think it's very important to remind of this important work. Can't you hear? And they had their recommendations on security issues, unresolved conflicts, the human dimension, economic connectivity, and external cooperation. And I think it would be very useful to have this back on the agenda, especially connected to this Helsinki Plus 50 innovation or innovative work to do with that. Thank you.
Thank you. With the President's authority, I will take 3 more speakers from Georgia, from the UK, and from Sweden, and those from Germany, Serbia, and Azerbaijan and Georgia also who have signed up will speak on the first committee. And there's also point of order from the UK, from the Ukrainian member, Gerasimov. So we go now with Maka Botoshvili from Georgia.
Thank you, Roberto. I take this opportunity to once again congratulate Minister of Foreign Affairs and Linda on assumption of chairmanship of the OSCE and express gratitude to her for visiting Georgia from at the very beginning of Swedish chairmanship. I want also to warmly congratulate Ms. Helga Schmidt on her appointment as the OSCE Secretary General. I strongly believe that her leadership and rich experience will unlock new opportunities for advancing issues that are of crucial importance for the OSCE and for Georgia. Dear colleagues, today on 25th of February, Georgia marked the 100 years of Soviet occupation that put our democratic development on hold for decades. Today, we still face Russian military presence in Georgia and occupation of our regions. Russia established so-called new reality and constantly violating fundamental norms and principles of international law and undermining rules-based international order. Latest developments in the region have proved that keeping conflict protracted is not a solution and does not guarantee lasting peace. We attach utmost importance to the Geneva international discussions, and we address Geneva international discussions as the only format between Georgia and Russia to address the security and humanitarian challenges. It is highly important to reach tangible results in order to find solutions for peaceful conflict resolution in full respect of the 12 August 2008 ceasefire agreement. However, Russia's military presence is growing with so-called borderization process and constant violation of human rights. Here I want to draw your attention to the recent outrageous decision of Russia-backed Tkhinvali authorities to sentence illegally detained Georgian citizen Zaza Gacheladze for more than 12 years. The fact that so-called court is using Russian criminal code once again proves that Russia is implementing annexation of the occupied regions of Georgia. Russia exercises effective control over the occupied territories of Georgia and clearly bears full responsibility for the gross violations of human rights on the ground. This is the conclusion from the ruling of the European Court of Human Rights from 21st of January 2021. This decision carries big importance for Georgia and the international community, who have long been demanding Russia to cease its blatant violations of Georgia's sovereignty and territorial integrity. It is of crucial importance that our partners demonstrate to Russian Federation that despite the pandemic and the challenges we face, the attention to the Russia-Georgia conflict and occupation of Georgian regions has not been diminished. We count on international community's support and engagement in the peaceful resolution of Russia-Georgia conflict and full implementation of EU-mediated ceasefire agreement by Russia. Strong international reactions can serve as a deterrent to Russia's destructive actions against Georgia and bring peace and stability to the wider OSCE region. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Wood from the UK.
Thank you. These are strange circumstances to be making my first contribution to this assembly. COVID-19 is, of course, primarily a public health crisis with serious economic and social consequences. As parliamentarians, our first priority is obviously protecting the health and economic interests of those who we represent. However, as we begin to emerge from the pandemic, the fight also takes on a security aspect. Even amongst our own member countries, the approach taken to vaccination and vaccines varies hugely. But for others, particularly in developing countries, there was no prospect of being able to invest huge sums in developing and securing vaccines as we have. However, the virus does not respect national or even continental borders. And unless we can demonstrate that a multilateral rules-based system is in the interest of those countries as well, then we know that there are other regimes with less noble intentions ready to take advantage and draw regions into their spheres of influence. Our nations must do everything we can to support the COVAX alliance, to offer access to vaccines once we have the resources to do so. It is not only morally right to do so, but clearly in our own interests for our regional and our global security.
Thank you. And the head of the Swedish delegation, Jan Boers, will close this part of the debate, and then there will be a point of order from the Ukrainian delegation. Jan, you have the floor.
Thank you.
Thank you very
President
much.
and dear excellencies. Thank you for organizing this meeting and for your participation. Two of the key strengths of the OSCE is its broad approach to security and being a forum for international cooperation. As the pandemic has shown, one of the most severe threats in recent history has been civil in nature. It is also a clear example of the importance of collective and joint action. The virus does not respect borders, nor does it respect social and economic differences. In this particular crisis, we need to extend cooperation beyond the OSCE region and support efforts globally. This issue will not be resolved until we have global containment, and it is in our interest to make that happen. It is therefore not only a question of international solidarity, but of our collective self-interest. Sweden has recently made additional contributions to the EU-led program COVAX precisely for this reason. We will not be able to return to normality until this pandemic is addressed on a global level. The uncertainty that the pandemic has created has worsened the situation of already exposed groups. Minorities have been disproportionately affected by COVID and its related effects. Moreover, but not necessarily directly linked to the pandemic, we are also seeing the expansion of LGBTQ-free zones in our region. These developments are unacceptable and a threat to the human dimension of security. I'm looking forward to our winter meeting and our discussions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. And now a point of order from the Ukrainian delegation, Artur Grass.
Before we take,
yes,
Mr. Secretary General, before we could move on to that, can I first of all thank all those members who actually managed to keep to time, and once again apologize for the fact that it was so short, and thank you for moderating the session. And can I now ask Ukraine to make their point of order? And of course, I hope that it is a point of order, not another point.
Dear Mr. President, dear colleagues, I was mentioned that because of that, my short answer, 30 seconds, not more. All countries see, and only Russian Federation does not see, that by occupying of Ukrainian Crimea and Ukrainian Donbass, they violate all norms and principles of international law and all OSCE norms and principles. And I want to say thank you for Minister Linde and Swedish chairmanship for their strong belief, which was mentioned today, that sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine must be restored in internationally recognized borders, including Ukrainian Crimea and Ukrainian Sevastopol. And by the way, tomorrow, day of resistance to Russian occupation of Crimea. Crimea is Ukraine. Thank you.
Well, thank you, our colleague from Ukraine. I have thumbing through the rules of procedure as I speak to you, and I understand the point you're making, but I'm not sure that it's a point of order. So thank you very much indeed for your, to everyone for your cooperation. Can I ask the Secretary General what time the next meeting is going to start? Because presumably he needs more time than it is available.
Yes, we're starting in 10 minutes. We need to sanitize the room because the meeting takes place here. There are four more who can take the floor in the three committees that are going to start now. There is the first committee and the other ones later on. So,
all right. Now, if you wanted